Tanfoglio. It's Italian for invincible stallion. Not really, I don't speak Italian, I don't know what it means. But I'd like to think that if Beavis got to name a gun, he'd name it Tanfoglio. Well, anyway, regardless of how we got here, the Stock II has always been an amazing production division race gun.
Are you threatening me?
The Stock II has been updated to be optics ready, and that's what we're looking at today. Are you ready? Stand by. Welcome back to the Humble Marksman channel, the only gun channel here on YouTube dripping with that BDE. That's right, Big Dad Energy. I took the kids fishing the other day, and if fishing means to you constantly cutting and retying new hooks over and over and over again until you decide to go home, go ahead and hit that like button. I'm David, and this is the Tanfoglio Stock II. Now, the Tanfoglio Stock II has been around for a while, and it has won a ton of competitions nationally and internationally. Eric Graffel used to shoot Tanfoglio back in, I guess we'll see if he still is his prime, but he's the best shooter in the world, and he was shooting for Tanfo for a long time. So the Stock II isn't necessarily new, but they got a new importer here in the United States. They used to be called Witness series of pistols. Now they're called Defiant, which is way more 1776 and cool, so I support that. And also they're in Amarillo, Texas, which is, you know, better. So if you like your Ferrari drivers wearing Woody type Toy Story hats, then that's probably the way you want it. I mean, seriously, Ferrari, your season was a joke already, and then you had to do that to poor Carlos. The only reason I bring that up is one of the criticisms of the Tanfoglio brand was that parts were notoriously difficult to get a hold of. I spoke with Chris over there at the Italian Firearms Group, asking him specifically about that, and what he had to say was that he has worked really, really hard to basically keep all of the parts that you need to keep these guns running in the States. He's got a couple resellers that he works with, but there is a healthy ecosystem of parts, and if he doesn't have the parts, he will get them for you. And for a competition shooter, that's kind of a big deal because these are higher round count guns that ultimately you end up going through some parts on, and knowing that the parts are available goes a long way towards making a selection. But this gun is particularly interesting because it comes with these stunning red grips, and it is now optic ready, and they're actually doing it correctly by providing the plate to actually mount optical sights onto the gun. And the plate's one of these universal jobs, so it mounts basically any footprint of a commonly available optic. I'm using a Seymour RTS2 in the very fashionable 10 MOA, but it'll take an SRO and all that other good stuff too. So those of you who are familiar with the gun immediately are probably already thinking, I really hope he compares it to a CZ Shadow 2 optic ready. For those of you who are unfamiliar, you may think, hey, that looks a lot like a CZ Shadow 2. If you'd like to see a comparison between this and the CZ Shadow 2, first you have to hit the like button. At 2,500 likes, I will put out the video comparing this to the Shadow 2. So hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you can see when this thing comes out, because I can't wait to tell you about this gun compared to the Shadow 2. So as discussed so far in the intro, the Tanfoglio Stock II is a production division racer, now updated for production optics or carry optics, depending on which sport you play. It is a double single action gun with a steel frame that has been hard chromed, which is the absolute finest gun finish for a competition pistol. The ergonomics on the gun are absolutely, I don't want to call them perfect because they could be improved a little bit, but they're nearly perfect. Like, they're really, really good. And the reason I say that, this is a rare gun to find, so I'll kind of describe it to you as if you were to pick up the thing in a gun store, because it would obviously catch your eye because of the amazing finish. The hard chrome absolutely shines. It looks absolutely beautiful. I love stainless steel or hard chrome type guns, and this one certainly checks the box for me. When you pick it up, you're immediately going to think, boy, that is a huge gun. The grip is gigantic, because it's a Tanfoglio large frame technically, but despite its really big frame, the trigger reach, because of the way they shape the grip tang and the recurve trigger that they give you, I have amazing leverage over the trigger. I can almost hook up to the first knuckle all the way through the trigger guard to pull double action if I choose to with my LXL hand. That doesn't mean a lot to you smaller handed folks. I put this in the hands of my wife and she signed off on it. She doesn't like double single guns because she has small hands. She said she could actually manage this one okay, although it's a little bit heavy, and that's unfortunately the trigger pull and the weight of the gun. The gun's about 44 ounces, so it's kind of heavy, but that's sort of optimum for a 9mm uncompensated pistol. But when you actually pick it up and let the thing sink down into your hands, you're going to basically fall in love. The grip tang, the way it is shaped, the way your finger lands on the trigger, the bite from the checkered front strap and back strap of the pistol absolutely sinks the gun down into your hands. And the way that the paddle safety is set up so that your thumb just lands on it and provides like a nice place you can kind of help like promote wrist lock with your hand, it makes it a really, really great gun to hold in hand. The one thing that you may notice is that the slide release, if you're thinking about emergency reloads, you are not going to be able to reach that with a firing grip in your thumb, so you're going to be dropping that with your support hand, which is no big deal. The slide serrations they provide at the front of the gun are very aggressive and bite you back, which is kind of nice. They even provide these weird like bumps at the back of the slide so you can pull from the back of the slide if you don't like using your optic. The gun features a heavy cone barrel, so this is kind of cool because it adds non-reciprocating mass, and for whatever reason, it ends up making the gun stupid accurate. We'll talk more about that later. Out of the box, it's going to come with a set of iron sights installed with the optical plate to adapt to install optical sights. The iron sights are pretty good. It has a black target front with a Bomar style adjustable rear. The sights seem plenty good, although I immediately mounted an optic for it because that's what these guns are for. The grip panels, despite being absolutely beautiful, are not all that grippy. They're, I mean, kind of ceremonial. The checkering is so good on the front and back strap of the gun, I don't care that much that they're not that grippy, but if this were a gun I was competing with actively, I would probably think about a grip upgrade. The shape of the hammer is what they call a heart-shaped hammer, but what that means is it's basically designed because in production division and carry optics division, you have to fully decock the guns to start with. You can actually ride the hammer down very easily based on the way the hammer is shaped and the texture provided on the rear. Sounds like a silly feature to be caring about, but I've seen more than a few CZ Shadow 2 owners go home because their hammer slipped at make ready and they accidentally torched a round into the berm. Then you're probably going to notice the double single action. Now this is a CZ clone. It's different in a number of ways internally with how it accomplishes what it accomplishes, and one of the things is because it has a very abbreviated hammer spring. Like a CZ hammer spring's like this long, a Tanfo hammer spring's about half as long or so. And why that's a challenge is it means that the double action just stacks up really, really heavy, and the double action on this pistol out of the box is about 9 pounds. With most of the stacking, it goes from about 50% of pull weight at the front of the stroke and builds progressively to about 70%, and then it jumps to about 99% for the last quarter of the pull. It doesn't really matter if you're shooting the gun in anger like you would be in competition, because you'll pull straight through it and you won't even notice it. The way it stages at the back of the trigger pull, you can kind of line up your shot before sending it home. If that's how you like to shoot your double action guns, then this gun has you covered. Now the gun does have a firing pin block, which is cool from a safety perspective, so you're probably thinking, well, the single action trigger is probably compromised as a result, and it actually isn't. For a production gun, it's actually very, very predictable, very, very crisp, although there is a small, very small amount of creep before it lets go. Single action on this gun was set up at 4 pounds on the example that I have here. And guys, this thing is totally bone stock. I have no polishing or any of that craziness, no trigger job stuff at all, and honestly I probably wouldn't even mess with the trigger on this thing if I picked it up as a competition gun. The magwell is really, really big, but it's also a steel magwell and the magazines are steel, and just messing with them I can see that mag binding issues could be a thing on this grip and frame, but that's like any steel frame pistol that uses steel magazines. Getting the gun on the range is where you really, really start to appreciate the Tanfo, and that's because the balance of the Stock II is nearly perfect. A lot of guns are very muzzle heavy with how they balance, and this is slightly muzzle heavy, but if I just barely hold on to the gun, it doesn't really try and fall forward too bad out of my hand. The muzzle, I would say the center of balance is roughly like in line with the front of the trigger guard, which is a pretty optimum place to have the gun balance. But when I actually got the optic mounted and started zeroing it on the range, I spent about 20 rounds getting the zero where I thought it was good. Then I backed it up to the 25-yard line and I printed zero on the head box to see how we landed, and shooting offhand unsupported, I was treated to this group. All right, I'm trying to zero this dot, so I just backed up to 25 yards all the way at the back of the bay, and it printed that 3-shot group with this Remington UMC, or Remington range, I guess is what it's called now. I immediately, just because the double action is the way it is, started shooting it with both my strong hand only and my weak hand only to see at about 15 yards how hard it was to hit on C-zone steel, and I was happy to report that it's really not that hard to hit with. So despite the double action pull being kind of stacky, it's not too bad. The gun absolutely shines when you start letting it go. Now, I was pretty impressed with how the gun returned to zero. I spent, the first trip out, I shot 200 rounds, took it back to the range, shot another 100, 150 rounds before making this video for you guys. And each time I shot it, I was more and more impressed with the gun. The ergonomics, as we discussed, it's not just it feels good in my hand, but like the science of why the ergonomics set up like they do make the gun insanely controllable when you shoot it at speed, which is the entire point of a competition gun. The way the trigger guard is relieved, the way the grip tang is shaped, combined with this nice recurved trigger, makes this gun really, really manageable to shoot with. And the way that the gun balances, the way it swings, and the way that it returns to zero when you're shooting fast, it should be more popular than it is. This gun is really, really good. If I turned my back on the one true division, I could say that I would seriously entertain the Tanfoglio Stock II as being my gun of choice in carry optics division, because it does so much right. The hard chrome finish is like one of the best finishes for a gun that's gonna be in and out of the holster a ton. The durability of these guns is actually quite good as well. Dazzy Shoots, which is DZ Shooting on Instagram, he was second at Carry Optics Nationals in 2021. He's been shooting these guns for the past 7 years or so, and he shared his information with me. He has broken almost no parts on the guns. He has broken some trigger return springs, but they last about 30,000 rounds, so that's pretty good with a bunch of dry fire. He has broken a slide stop as well, but it was over 50,000 rounds. His first Stock II, he still has an operation, and it has over 150,000 rounds on the slide frame and barrel. That's right, he's still shooting the same barrel. So if you want to see a guy who absolutely shreds with one of these, Dazzy is your guy over on Instagram. Some of you guys who've been around the block for a while and watched the Stock IIs show up on the scene in the early 2010s can remember that the Tanfoglios had a bit of fit and finish kind of issues that has been improving steadily over the years. So much so that, as I mentioned, this gun as it showed up to me was 100% reliable, didn't have any problem setting off any of the ammo that I shot through it, and the trigger is at such a place where I wouldn't even mess with it until it was time to perform maintenance on the gun because it's not that bad. For a regular gun, it's a good trigger, and for a competition gun, it's acceptably good. So the gun is really, really squared away. As far as aftermarket and all that is concerned, and that is a major concern with a competition style pistol, is how easy is it to get a hold of magazines and holsters and all that kind of stuff. Good news is that the Tanfoglio brand is hugely popular all over the world, so you can get Tanfo holsters from all your favorite holster manufacturers. Magazines are pretty cheap. You can get them for about 25 bucks. Back in the day, they used to be about 15, but just like everything else, magazines cost more than they used to. But even still, $25 is very manageable. Magazines are high quality. The case that the gun comes with is amazing. It's a Negrini case, which is what the Sig Sauer custom shop uses for all their fancy custom pistols. The only problem with it is that it's for a regular Stock II, which is iron-sighted. So as soon as you mount your fancy optic on it, it doesn't fit in the box anymore, which kind of makes me sad because it's a beautiful Ferrari red box, and I'd love to flex showing up on the range with this thing, but I can't keep the gun in it, so I'd just be carrying around a suitcase at that point, which is kind of silly. Negatives, as far as negatives are concerned, there really aren't any big ones, but I'll go ahead and share the ones with you that there are. First and foremost is fit and finish, and it's not because the fit and finish is unacceptable, it's just the gun is so beautiful with the red aluminum grips and the hard chrome finish that's like a honed finish on the side, and then when you rotate it, it's got this nice matte finish. Like, it looks like a stupid high-end gun, but then when you actually like mess with the slide and stuff, it's fit like a production gun. So it's not that it's poorly fit, because it's fit fine. It's just that it doesn't have like that ball bearing, buttery smooth thing that the aesthetics would suggest that it has. That's a silly thing to knock it for, but if you experience one of these in person, you'll understand what that is. Second is there are some light machine marks in some of the bare metal, specifically on the inside of the dust cover, but also if you turn the gun around and look under the underside where the trigger meets the frame, there's a couple visible machining marks that you can see there. It's not a big deal, but at the same time, again, beautiful gun, and you're like, I want this gun to be the very, very finest, but I mean, at the end of the day, guys, it is a production gun. Double action stacking, it's not a problem for me, but I know some people will say that's a problem for me because I want a linear, predictable double action stroke, and fair enough. And possibly the only thing that is noteworthy is getting the reloads to work on this frame. The mag binding, if you're not like totally squared away, like If you're coming from a polymer gun switching onto one of these steel frame type guns, it's going to take a minute to get the reloads down to where you're picking up the same speed you would with the polymer magazines going into a polymer frame. Another big negative is that these things aren't just kicking around on the shelves of your favorite gun store. A lot of you guys, the first time that you see one of these guns would be if you decide to order it when it shows up to your FFL, which is a heck of a way to just figure out whether you like a gun or not, because the guns are about $1,600 MSRP. So that is the Tanfoglio Stock II. It is a brilliant carry optic selection. It very well might dethrone my current favorite carry optic style pistol, which is the Sig Sauer P320 AXG with the lock palm swell grips. I think this gun is a little bit more ergonomic than that. I think the trigger's a little bit nicer, and I think it behaves a little bit nicer in recoil. So it's really a force to be reckoned with. Unfortunately, you're probably not going to be able to check one out at the store that you like to go to. So you're just going to have to go on faith if you ever decide you want to check one out. So remember guys, if you want to see the comparison to the Shadow 2, hit that like button. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, guys.